The first sign that my life wasn't really mine came from a sound that shouldn't have existed. A soft click, not loud, not dramatic, just the faint, tired click of a door lock that had already been turned before my hand ever touched it. I was 63 years old, running late for surgery, coffee burning my tongue, pager buzzing like my chest might explode, and I remember thinking that's weird. Then I did what I'd been doing for years. I ignored it. When you spend your life cutting people open and stitching them back together, you learn something dangerous. You start believing you can fix anything later, that whatever feels off can wait, that problems are symptoms, not emergencies. That mistake almost cost me my entire existence. I'm a surgeon, have been for over 30 years, the kind of doctor whose name carries weight, the kind hospitals brag about on billboards, the kind of woman people assume is untouchable. What they don't see is that confidence in the operating room can turn into blind trust at home. Every morning before sunrise, I left my house the same way, same hallway, same framed diplomas, same photo of my husband smiling like a man who had nothing to hide, same lock. And that sound kept happening. Click. Like someone had just left. I told myself it was the wood swelling. Old houses make noises. Old women imagine things. That's what I said in my head, half joking, half afraid. Fear doesn't announce itself when it shows up. It whispers. And if you don't listen, it waits. The day everything changed wasn't dramatic either. No storm, no screaming match. Just an unexpected day off. A surgery got canceled. Rare thing. I drove home in the middle of the afternoon, still wearing scrubs, already planning a nap I hadn't earned. When I opened the door, the house smelled wrong. Not bad, just unfamiliar, like someone else's decisions had been made in my space. I walked into my home and felt it immediately the same way you feel when a patient looks fine, but something in their eyes tells you they're lying. My files were stacked differently. My medical license, which I keep locked away, was out then carefully put back. Bank documents I hadn't touched in years were aligned too perfectly, like someone trying not to leave fingerprints. Nothing was stolen. That's what scared me. Whoever had been there wasn't searching. They already knew where everything was. I stood in my living room, heart pounding, realizing something I should have realized much earlier in life. Theft doesn't always mean loss. Sometimes it means use. That night, my husband came home like always, kissed my cheek, asked about my day, complained about traffic, ate dinner like a man whose conscience slept just fine. I watched him the way I watch a patient under anesthesia, quietly, carefully, waiting for the smallest reaction. Nothing. That's when it hit me. If someone was inside my life, it wasn't a stranger. It was someone who loved me well enough to destroy me slowly. And that was the moment I decided to stop being a wife and start being a surgeon again. Because whatever disease had entered my life, it was already spreading. And I was done pretending it wasn't terminal. The hardest part about suspecting the people you love isn't fear. It's restraint. Every instinct in my body screamed to confront him, to ask why my files were touched, why the house felt borrowed, why my name suddenly felt heavier, like it was being carried somewhere I wasn't invited. But surgeons don't cut until they know exactly where the damage is. So I watched. I started paying attention to details I'd trained myself to ignore for years. The way my husband moved through the house, confident, not cautious. The way he knew exactly where things were, even things I hadn't moved in a decade. The way he stopped asking questions about my schedule. That part stuck with me. When someone stops needing updates, it's usually because they already know. I checked our shared calendar, meetings I didn't remember scheduling, errands that had no receipts. A pattern forming around my operating days, the long ones, the 12-hour marathons when I wouldn't be home. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Always Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's when I did something I'd never done in my marriage. I lied. I told him I'd added an emergency surgery to my Thursday schedule. Told him I'd be at the hospital until late. Told him not to wait up. He didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions, didn't even fake concern. That was the first real incision. Instead of going to the hospital, I parked 3 blocks away from my house, hands gripping the steering wheel like it might keep me grounded. I sat there for 40 minutes, heart beating louder than my engine, wondering when I'd turned into a woman spying on her own life. At 1:12 p.m., my front door opened. I didn't need binoculars. I recognized the walk. Her walk. My best friend. The woman who'd held my hand at charity galas. The woman who'd cried on my couch when her marriage fell apart. The woman I'd trusted with my spare key because she felt safer knowing she could check on the house. She didn't knock. She never knocked. She let herself in like the place belonged to her. I don't remember breathing while I watched. I remember noticing stupid things, her shoes, the way she paused to straighten a picture frame, how comfortable she looked moving through rooms filled with my life. This wasn't sneaking. This was routine. She stayed inside for 3 hours. 3 hours. When she finally left, she didn't rush. She smiled to herself like someone who'd just closed a good deal. That night, I didn't say a word. I poured wine, asked my husband about his day, let him talk while I listened for cracks in his voice that never came. I went to bed next to a man who smelled like my house. That's when the second truth hit me, colder than the first. This wasn't about cheating. Cheating is sloppy, emotional, reckless. This was organized. I took a personal day the next week and hired a private investigator under a corporate alias. No drama, no tears, just paperwork and quiet money. Within days, the puzzle started coming together. A clinic I'd never heard of operating under my specialty. Billing insurance under variations of my name. My credentials listed. My reputation doing the heavy lifting. They weren't just using my house. They were using my identity. And the final piece? The money wasn't disappearing. It was being saved. Joint accounts, long-term transfers, a future fund, for a wedding I wasn't invited to, for a life they were building, with my name holding the door open. And the worst part? They weren't done yet. The moment you realize you're not the villain in someone else's story, but the exit plan, that's when everything shifts. The investigator didn't sugarcoat it. He never does. That's why I hired him. They're not just using your credentials, he said. They're positioning you. Positioning. Like a body on an operating table. Turns out the clinic wasn't cutting corners. It was cutting people. Unsafe procedures. Undertrained staff. Fake follow-ups. And every single chart? Signed with my name or close enough to pass a lazy audit. If something went wrong, it wouldn't be their faces on the evening news. It'd be mine. Medical boards don't ask if you were betrayed. They ask if the license is yours. I went home that night and sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, realizing something terrifying. They didn't need me anymore. That's when I checked the divorce paperwork. Yes, paperwork. It was already drafted. My husband had met with an attorney. Quietly, efficiently. Grounds listed as irreconcilable differences. A proposed settlement that painted me as distracted, emotionally unavailable, mentally exhausted. Burnout. A perfect story for a 63-year-old surgeon. They weren't just planning to leave me. They were planning to bury me professionally. And here's the part that still makes my stomach turn. They planned to get married fast. Real fast. The PI found deposits, venue, caterer, jewelry, all paid in cash, routed through shell accounts tied to the clinic. A future funded by procedures done under my name. My life was their startup capital. And once the wedding was done, they'd vanish. New state. New last name for her. He'd play the grieving ex-husband of a woman whose career collapsed under pressure. I'd be left holding lawsuits, criminal investigations, and a reputation shredded beyond repair. They thought age made me slow. They thought love made me blind. What they forgot was this. I've spent my entire career watching people lie while their vitals crashed. And I always know when it's time to act. I didn't confront them. I didn't tip them off. Instead, I became invisible. I duplicated files, tracked timestamps, matched signatures, pulled IP logs from our home network, installed cameras not hidden, just overlooked. The kind people ignore because they think they're safe. I watched them rehearse conversations. I watched her practice signing my name. I watched my husband smile while planning my erasure. And through all of it, I slept next to him like nothing had changed, because the most dangerous moment in any operation is when the patient wakes up too early. I waited until I had enough evidence to end careers, not hurt feelings. Careers, licenses, freedom. The day I finally walked into my attorney's office, I didn't feel angry. I felt calm. That scared him more than rage ever could. When he asked what I wanted, I told him the truth. I don't want revenge, I said. I want my life back. He nodded once and replied, then we do this by the book. And that's when I knew they weren't getting married. They were getting exposed. And they had no idea how close I was to cutting the lights. People think traps are loud. They imagine confrontations, shouting, slamming doors. Maybe a dramatic, I know everything moment straight out of a bad TV show. That's not how real traps work. Real traps feel like freedom right before they close. Once my attorney confirmed we had enough to move forward, I did something that surprised even him. I waited. Not out of fear, out of strategy. I loosened the leash. I stopped double-checking my files at home. I acted tired, distracted. I complained about my age, my back, how maybe retirement wasn't such a bad idea anymore. I let them believe the narrative they'd written for me was working. And it worked beautifully. They got sloppy. The clinic expanded its hours. More patients, faster turnaround, riskier procedures. They were chasing cash now, wedding cash, honeymoon cash, start-over cash. My name was everywhere. Prescriptions, intake forms, referral letters. And here's the thing they didn't realize. Every single document they touched became evidence. The PI recorded her signing my name. Clear as day. No gloves, no hesitation. Just confidence borrowed from a life that wasn't hers. My husband? He handled the money, transfers, shell accounts, fake consulting fees sent to my retirement fund that I'd never opened. He even joked on camera once. She won't notice. She never does. That was the moment something inside me went cold. Not angry, focused. I coordinated with the state medical board. Quietly, through legal channels. No accusations, just concerns. Enough to trigger an audit. Audits terrify bad clinics the way biopsies terrify bad doctors. Then I scheduled my move. Not out. Back in. I told my husband I was cutting back hours. That I wanted to be more present. That maybe we should take a trip once things slowed down. He smiled like a man who thought he'd already won. 2 days later, the audit hit. Inspectors. Paperwork. Questions no one had answers to. Patients asking why my name was on records when I'd never met them. Panic travels fast. She called him. He called lawyers. They tried to delete files. But you can't erase what's already mirrored. That night, my husband didn't come home. I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I was served divorce papers. Right on schedule. What he didn't know was that my response had already been filed, along with a separate packet forwarded to prosecutors. Fraud, identity theft, illegal medical practice, conspiracy, the kind of charges that don't go away with apologies, the kind that follow you forever. When he finally showed up at the house, face pale, voice shaking, he asked the question every caught liar asks. How much do you know? I looked at him and told the truth. Enough to end this. He laughed nervously, like he could still charm his way out. You wouldn't do that to me, he said. After everything. That's when I realized something important. He still thought this was personal. It wasn't. This was professional. And professionals finish what they start. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just handed him my attorney's card and said, "You should call someone." Because I already did. As he walked out, phone shaking in his hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. But the real fallout? That hadn't even started yet, because the next move wasn't mine. It was the law's. And they were about to learn the difference between love and liability. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The evidence I'd gathered wasn't just damning, it was catastrophic. Every file, every bank transfer, every document pointed straight at them. My husband, the man I had trusted with my life, and my closest friend, the one I'd shared secrets and laughter with for decades, had turned my identity into their personal cash cow. And now I realized the sickest part, they weren't just using me for money. They were in love. My husband, with that polished smile, that voice I used to melt over, and my friend, the one who once held my hand when I was scared. They were planning to start a life together using me as their stepping stone. And the kicker? My husband was planning to divorce me first, make it look like the legal and financial mess was all on me, so they could walk away clean. I stared at the ceiling of my apartment, my hands gripping the arms of the chair like it was the only solid thing left in my world. Every memory of us, every milestone, every quiet Tuesday night we'd spent together now felt like a lie. My heart wasn't just broken, it was being weaponized against me. I had to be smart. I couldn't rush in, couldn't scream, couldn't let my rage turn into a mistake they could exploit. So I did what I did best. I analyzed, documented, and built a case. Just like in surgery, precision was everything. I tracked financials, emails, private messages, everything that could tie them together. Every time I thought I had a lead, I'd pause, double-check, make sure it was bulletproof. There was no room for emotion, just facts. But while I was planning my next move, I started noticing other oddities. Little signs I'd missed before grocery deliveries I never ordered. Strange phone calls at odd hours, and the subtle, almost imperceptible way my husband would glance at my friend during our conversations. That look. That smug, secretive look. The kind of look that makes you realize people you love are playing a game you weren't invited to. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just financial betrayal. This was a full-on life hijack. They weren't content with just my money. They wanted my life, my history, my identity, and my family to be collateral damage. I felt my chest tighten, but there was no room for panic. I reminded myself, I was a surgeon. I had saved lives when they were on the edge, when every heartbeat counted, when panic could be fatal. I could handle this. I had to. So I started laying the groundwork for what would be the ultimate confrontation. But I knew one thing for sure, they would never see it coming. The woman they had underestimated, the one they thought would quietly get older and fade into the background, that woman was still very much alive, and she was about to pull off a procedure that would leave them gasping. And as I sat there, planning my every move, I realized something even scarier. I had already started enjoying the thought of watching them unravel. It wasn't revenge, not really, it was justice, surgical, precise, and unrelenting. And when the time came, they wouldn't just lose their scheme, they'd lose everything they thought they could take from me. But I had to wait. Timing was everything. One wrong move and everything could collapse. And just as I was about to set the next phase in motion, my phone buzzed. A message. From my husband. A single line. We need to talk. Tonight. That line alone made my stomach knot, because I knew exactly what that conversation was really about. And I knew it was going to change everything. And just like that, the calm before the storm shattered. I had no idea the truth waiting for me at that dinner would be even darker than I could imagine. I walked into the dining room that evening like I was just another wife, another friend, another face in the house. My husband was there, casual, acting like nothing was wrong. That same polished grin plastered across his face. My friend was there too, smiling like the world owed her something, her hand brushing against his just enough to make it obvious. But I didn't flinch. I didn't react. I had all the cards, all the proof, every single piece of evidence stacked against them. I poured myself a glass of wine, letting the red swirl in my hand, feeling the warmth spread through me. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about clarity, about justice. I waited for the moment to hit, for the words that would shatter their fantasy of power. "So, I got your message," I said casually, taking a sip, letting my eyes meet his. "We need to talk, huh?" The look on his face, that little flicker of panic, was satisfying. He thought he was in control. He never suspected I had spent weeks mapping every single transaction, screenshotting every conversation, documenting every move. He never suspected that I had consulted a top-tier attorney who'd already filed emergency orders to freeze assets and secure the legal evidence. I didn't start with the affair. I started with the money. I laid out the spreadsheets, the bank transfers, the shell companies. I watched his face go from confident smugness to disbelief, to panic. And my friend, oh, the betrayal etched into her smile faded when she realized she wasn't untouchable anymore. Every envelope, every hidden deposit, every plan they had to run off together crumbled before them. They tried excuses, tried gaslighting me, tried blaming circumstances and each other. But the facts didn't lie. The proof was cold, precise, undeniable. And then, just for effect, I played the security camera footage. My friend entering my apartment, rummaging through drawers, swapping envelopes, spraying my perfume like some twisted ritual. Every smirk, every glance, every calculated movement, it was all recorded. I sat back, letting it sink in. The weight of their betrayal, the audacity of their plan, it was finally laid bare. And my husband? He realized too late that his meticulous construction of lies had collapsed. No charming words, no pleading, no threats could save him. The divorce papers, the asset freeze, the forensic audit, they were already in motion. I didn't gloat. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry, because I didn't need to. I had survived. I had reclaimed everything: my name, my money, my identity, the house, the memories, the life they tried to steal. I could rebuild all of it. But more importantly, I had rebuilt myself. Years later, standing on my balcony overlooking the city lights, I realized that the real victory wasn't in the legal wins, the frozen accounts, or the destroyed plans. The victory was in the knowledge that I had the strength to survive betrayal at its most personal level. That even at 63, even after life tried to use me, manipulate me, erase me, I was still standing. Stronger, wiser, untouchable in a way they never could be. I am not just a surgeon. I am the woman who walked through fire, who faced the abyss of betrayal and emerged whole. And if anyone ever doubts that truth can heal what lies try to destroy, they just need to remember me. The glass of trust may have shattered, but I learned to walk on the shards. And in doing so, I built a life no one could ever steal again.